This is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3.
Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for the good programming, and I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Dolly Parton's death has had shockwaves sent around the world. That is the King's Guard performing 9 to 5 in London. You know, Jim once said that whenever I take time off, something bad happens. If I'd have known the bad thing was going to be Dolly Parton, I would have been on the air, even with laryngitis. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And she was, I mean, those of you of a certain age will understand this. She was only 80. I mean, good grief. You know, Mel Brooks is about to have a big celebration in honor of his 100th birthday. Why couldn't we have had 100 years of Dolly Parton, too? You know, there's a lot that we could say about that. But I want to share with you what some other folks have been saying about Dolly Parton. Alex Perlman is a podcaster with a monster following. And he posted his take on why Dolly Parton was so special, especially in a world where we have Elon Musk's and Jeff Bezos's, who seem to want to use their fortunes to only satisfy their egos. Dolly Parton was known probably more for her philanthropy than even her artistry. She made sure that kids had books to read. She took care of all the people at Dolly World. It was known that if you worked at her amusement park, Dolly World, she paid for your kids to go to college. Not flashy, just doing what she could to bring sunshine wherever she went. Alex, I was perusing things in bed in those moments when I was conscious over the last few days. I was reading what people had to say about the passing of Dolly Parton. You know, and everybody was talking about how she was one of the people where it didn't matter whether you were MAGA or progressive or socialist, what your religion was. She was universally loved, and she will be universally missed. As I said a moment ago, Alex Perlman, who is a very popular podcaster, posted what I thought was one of the best takes on a world without Dolly Parton and what she brought to the world we lived in. He's a little free with his language, so Lady B kind of got rid of some of the words that you can't play on the radio, but I want you to hear what Alex Perlman had to say about Dolly.
We should never forget that Dolly Parton chose to not be a billionaire. Because she could have. Dolly Parton made so much money, she could have let her money make money. But instead, she chose to reinvest in people and her community. And today, when I went to my mailbox on the day she died, there was proof of that sitting right there waiting for me. It was this book right here, Forts, from the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. Since the day my son has been born, once a month, The Dolly Parton Imagination Library, in partnership with local nonprofits, has mailed my son, like millions of American kids across America, a book for his parents to read to him, to foster a love of reading and literacy and dreams and wonder. And when my son gets home, we'll unwrap this and we'll read it. But she sent many books to us. She sent this book. It's called A Little Emotional. Because again, Dolly Parton spent millions of dollars making sure that kids were not illiterate. She wanted to make sure that kids knew how to read, how they could understand the world around them, and that they could understand how to process their emotions. This is what she spent her money on instead of buying Twitter. She sent the animal song to my son instead of trying to buy an election. She sent little poems for tiny ears instead of trying to spread misinformation about vaccines. She sent dandelion magic to our front door instead of villainizing trans people. J.K. Rowling. She sent K.S. for kindness instead of trying to go and harp even more on dividing us as a people. She sent Llama Llama meets the babysitter instead of going and reinvesting in Palantir. She sent the big slide instead of making sure we slid into fascism. She said, how we say I love you instead of making us hate each other. She said, let's explore the seashore instead of buying flock cameras. She said, don't lose Mr. Cuddles, a book all about loss and how to get around and over these feelings through your family. She sent birding for babies, and she sent my son's favorite book, Gaga Mistake Day, a book about how you can hang out with your grandmother and be silly and make mistakes and everything will be all right. That pile is proof of why Dolly Parton will be remembered and loved. Not because her name's on the side of a building, not because of anything else, but because she reinvested in people, in hope, in love, and in the future. I would like Jeff Bezos and all the other ones to remember that as they're looking down at us from their rockets, because that's the closest those will get to heaven, because only angels like Dolly deserve to be up there.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Alex. And by the way, I don't know if you saw the video, but the Empire State Building went pink last night for Dolly Parton. And you know what time they turned the pink lights on? 9:25. 9:25. Alex is right. Really makes people like Elon Musk look incredibly venal, doesn't it? People who have enough wealth to change the world, to end world hunger. And nope. No, that's not where it's going. That is not where it's going, is it? Yeah. Okay. And today, my son shared the news with me this morning that Tim Curry had passed away. Tim Curry had a devastating stroke some time back, but he still, even from his wheelchair, he still was very active. He was very politically active, you know, raising money for liberal candidates. He didn't let that stroke slow him down. But he passed away today, too. You know, I'm glad I'm back at work, so maybe we can stem this tide. Jim, don't hold this against me, okay? I really, really, really am very sorry. And I will think twice before getting sick again. So what else have we got going? Well, while I was unconscious for most of the weekend, periodically waking up and seeing what was going on in the world, I discovered that apparently we have really put the nail in the coffin of trade talks with Canada. Yeah. Trade talks were called off late at night, early morning, however you want to view it, because apparently as part of a trade agreement with Canada, we wanted them to give us the right to stop any trade deal they entered into with another country. So, when Donald Trump first started messing with Canada, Mark Carney went to China and made a trade deal. According to reporting on what Howard Lutnick was requesting of Canada, there was language in this new deal that said if Canada made a trade deal with any other country and the United States didn't like it, they could stop it. Hello? Are you kidding me? Oh, and you know how Quebec, the language there is French, and French and English are both the languages of Canada? Talk about hubris. We asked the Canadians to agree to limit the amount of statements and government stuff that had to be in French as well as in English. We asked a sovereign country, that is a two-language country, to limit, you just limit the amount of stuff you do in French, would you? Okay, sign this deal. This is a great deal for you. But, we want to be able to kill any deal you make with anybody else that we don't like. And we want you to stop putting so darn much stuff in French. For goodness sake, we can't read French. Unbelievable. Wab Canoe, Premier Eby, Ontario Premier Doug Ford have all been very vocal about this and very vocal in their utter disgust and contempt for Donald Trump. My favorite was Doug Ford. Yeah. The Premier of Ontario, who said that Donald Trump could kiss his, and he said, and my is pretty big, so there's a lot of territory for him to kiss. He said, what can I say? I'm a big guy. Wab Canoe, another premier in Canada of another province, said that you can't make a good deal with a bad person. And that what happened with the trade negotiations was proof of that. Can't make a good deal with a bad person. And Donald Trump has done more to unify Canada than anything inside or outside could possibly have done. Canadians, we think of them as like a monolith. Oh, Canadians, they're this, they're that. Well, like most countries, there are people on the left, people on the right, people in the middle, people who have opposing viewpoints, opposing desires, opposing wants and needs. But you know what? They all agree on one thing. Right now, they are unified in their belief that we suck. We do. Because we do suck, at least in the way we treat them. As I said, the one of the premiers, David Eby, I believe he's from British Columbia, if I'm not mistaken, said, you know what? We need to stop buying anything from the United States. Canada, one of the things that's really hurting is the bourbon industry, because Canadians were huge consumers of American bourbon. But David Eby is saying, don't buy anything from the United States. And for a while now, a lot of the grocery stores in Canada, they have adopted a maple leaf to put on the shelves so that people who are in the store know if something was made in Canada. So we got British Columbia's premier against us. We got Webb Canoe, the premier of Manitoba, who said, can't make a good deal with a bad person, and that we should stop trying, Canada. And Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who said Donald Trump could kiss his... Can't say it on the radio. Oh, and... oh, dear God. Somebody in the Republican Party had better step in and finally say the quiet part out loud that Donald Trump is not fit to be president. I'm no fan of J.D. Vance. You know what Donald Trump's response was? What a statement he made on Truth Social to this whole collapse? Because Canada wouldn't agree to give us veto power over their trade deals and wouldn't agree to reduce the amount of stuff they do in the French language. Because, I don't know, it annoys Donald Trump. I don't know why it would. He doesn't read English. He certainly doesn't read French. Donald Trump has said that he's going to rename Lake Ontario. It's going to be Lake America if the Canadians don't fall into line. It would be a joke if it weren't the reality we live with. And what are we going to do when this guy really goes off the rails with the military? If indeed he hasn't already. I mean, we've seen Hegseth parting ways with general after admiral. And we're told, yeah, they just didn't see eye to eye. And as far as Canada, the Wall Street Journal, which is given up on Trump entirely, they posted an editorial about this trade war with Canada, and the title is The Dumbest Trade War Revisited, because they had posted about it before. Trump's decision to escalate a tariff brawl with Canada makes no economic or political sense. He never knew what he was doing in the first place. But at least in the first term, he went into it knowing he didn't know what to do. That's why he surrounded himself with people who knew what they were doing, and that is why they stalled or derailed his worst impulses. And he learned that lesson. This time around, ain't nobody going to say no to him. You wouldn't dare. You wouldn't dare say no to the man. Because if you do, you're out. And frankly, since you don't know what you're doing, the only reason you've got this big job is because of him. So Pete Hegseth is going to stand up to him and say, oh, by the way, we had, because it certainly appears the future of warfare involves a much bigger use of drones than we ever would have expected. And yes, there were people in the Army who felt that there should be a special unit that sort of learned everything there is to know about drone warfare and became the experts on it. Nah. Pete Hegseth said no. No. We don't need that. So it's being disbanded. Something that every military person that I've seen posting anything about this, and even non-military people, the historian Ann Applebaum was like, this makes no sense. It has become clear to everyone. There are land drones. There are drones in the air. There are underwater drones. There are drones that function as boats. This is clearly where warfare is going right now. But does Pete Hegseth want us to be on the cutting edge? Hell no. No. No, we started to put together this special unit to be like experts in everything to do with drone warfare. Well, we don't need that. We don't need that. It's almost like he and Donald Trump are doing everything in their power to make us weak. It really does seem that way. And man, anybody who stands up and says no is gotten rid of. Apparently the new guy who's he's not been put up for the top job, but he's like the deputy secretary of the Army, somebody who apparently is willing to say yes to Pete Hegseth, is this General Leneve. And I was reading this morning. My voice is starting to go again. I was reading this morning that the Republican Party or the White House, they have no plans to put this Leneve up to be the actual head of the Army, because they know so many Republicans have let the White House know that they hate this guy. So he's the acting. And I don't know how long you can stay in an acting role, because for some of the jobs in the government, you can only be a fill-in for so long, and then either another body fills it, or you have to nominate someone. But even within the Republican Party, this Leneve is so hated that there's no way he would be confirmed. Yikes. So, there you have it. And as far as where things are with Iran, since it doesn't seem to be a front page story for any of the major media I follow, I'm guessing it's where it was when I got sick, which is to say nowhere, which is to say that Donald Trump can't figure out how to get out of that situation. So what, he's going to pretend it doesn't exist? Apparently so. Okay. 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. We are going to come back, and I am going to, as long as my voice holds out, I'm going to read your texts and take your calls. We'll be back after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Want to join the conversation?
I just wanted to thank your station for consistently reporting the facts.
In a world of clickbait headlines, your station is who I trust for the real news.
Call Joan now at 773-763-9278 and join the conversation. Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820.
Many of you have texted in about your love of Dolly Parton. You know, I was trying to think when I was first thinking about this. Have I ever read anything negative about her? The closest that it ever came, because her husband did not enjoy the limelight and never was in the public eye. Her husband, Carl. And, years and years and years ago, I think when she first got mega famous, people were like, ooh, well, that must mean something. There must be something else going on there. But it kind of never amounted to anything. Carl, by the way, died last year. But I can't think of anybody who ever wrote a negative article. How could you write a negative article about somebody like that? With her self-deprecating sense of humor, making fun of fun of herself at every turn. I can't even remember. I can't even remember her ever coming out negatively. She was all about love. Many years ago, a friend of mine was an extra, or I don't know what they call them now, day players or something, on a film that starred Dolly Parton. And extras or day players are always told, don't talk to the stars, don't leave them alone. But my friend started a conversation with Dolly Parton, and Dolly leaned over and whispered, you're not supposed to talk to me. And my friend said, you know what? But you don't feel like a star, you feel like family. And Dolly melted, just melted at that and said, oh, well, in that case. Let's go to the phone lines. Jim is on the line. And Jim, I am not responsible for Dolly Parton's death. Don't hold it against me. I swear to God.
Joan, you sound like a million even with the laryngitis. First of all, Patty Vasquez picked a fine week to take her family up to Quebec and Montreal because, let's face it, that's been a Commonwealth. Canada's been a Commonwealth since about 1862, and then they put it in their constitution that you could speak French in Quebec and then obviously Montreal. But to bring this up in a negotiation is totally...
Isn't that insane?
It's the most insane thing I've ever heard in my life.
Canada's saying they'll strike a trade deal with us, but, the people in the United States have to promise not to visit Hawaii, because that just is unacceptable to them. I mean, it makes no sense.
No, I know. Well, it'd be like negotiating. America would be negotiating with any country and say, we command you to speak English, otherwise we won't negotiate with you. But anyway, the other thing is the beleaguered priest, Father Plager, in his conference today, he said, it's awfully strange that I criticized Trump at the beginning of the week, and then this allegation came up about 4 days later. Now, I don't know if they're micromanaging every poor person on this earth who criticizes this administration, but I get that feeling, Joan, which is really a strange feeling to have. In other words, you're being suspected, or you're being...
I'm not a parishioner of Father Plager, but after this last accusation of, sexual abuse or whatever, I don't know if it was Block Club, talked to a lot of people, And because, this isn't the first time. This has happened multiple times. And they believe that when, because Flager really goes against the gangs and really tries to keep people out of gangs and that sort of thing. And the feeling is that whenever the gangs get ticked off with him, they find somebody to make these accusations just to make his life uncomfortable. Because this has happened before, and it's always been unfounded. But that's what they do to harass him.
Yeah, I know. Not only the gangs, but he alluded to Trump specifically today, and saying that he had a feeling that they might be behind this. But
Who knows?
I wouldn't put it past him.
Neither would I.
I wouldn't put it past him because he criticizes him. He talks about the immigration, the terrible immigration policy we have, and the homeless won't be helped. Look at the bills that they're pulling. For child, Head Start, HUD denying housing that would help some of the homeless people. I mean, everything is so diabolically mean-spirited.
Mm-hmm.
But Joan, I'm glad you're back on the air, and I'm glad you're going strong. Anyway, thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Jim. Joan. Appreciate the call. I always tell you that Dave from Hoffman Estates sends me these usually they're political cartoons. Somebody made a cartoon where all of the major country stars who have passed away recently are welcoming Dolly Parton into heaven. And Dave's on the line right now. Dave, I really, that cartoon I thought was so touching, so very touching.
Good. I still got some more if you want.
Okay.
That before go into Dolly, she's the antithesis of Trump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then before I got in, one more for the death call role was they say J.P. Morgan. Her last name. She used to be in the Gong Show, but she was an American popular music singer and actress and TV personality. Passed away. She was 94.
Wow. Well, as long as we're piling them up, Shelley Fabrez died too. Yeah. You only know that name if you're of a certain generation. But yeah. I didn't realize that she was married to the guy from MASH.
Yeah, that Farrell.
Yeah, Mike Farrell.
Yeah, and that's it. I was mentioning to Lady B, first off, that have you ever thought about how it's okay to accept a 17-year-old for military service with parental consent? But now the closest to voting is if a 17-year-old who will turn 18 before Election Day can register to vote. It's okay for a 17-year-old to get parental consent to serve and possibly die or get mangled up for the country. Mm-hmm. Why couldn't it work the same for the voting? That parental consent at 17.
Why not? If you can die for your country, you should be able to have a say in who the leaders are who might send you to your death. I don't know. It doesn't seem that odd to me.
Well, but that's why I keep nagging on this, because like I told Lady B, I don't want to hear this after, November or something, that, the Republicans are going to do something slimy and tricky, and that, they'll get in, and then, we got some that, they watch the polls and say, well, we were up by X amount. Well, you don't know how many Republicans just called up. I'm sick of hearing about the polls, that we were beaten by so much, and we're letting this stuff slide by. I mean, you should do one of these sound bites, until the Election Day, so that we don't get caught with our pants down, that we get these young people, because as I said before, when Harris lost all of them young male voters in the last election, so, I mean, we got to do something like that, so we can't say, well, we didn't know. I'm just sorry I vented, but I mean, I'm so tired of hearing that.
Yeah. Hey.
And I don't know if you guys can cut some kind of thing, any one of you hosts, all of them, play it, ad nauseum if you have to, just to have these parents and remind their daughters and sons, that are going to turn 18, before the November 3rd, so. Mm-hmm. And Okay, and then now on a more pleasant or somewhat pleasant, I read where there's a petition to rename Nashville Airport after Dolly Parton. It already has reached 70,000 signatures.
That would be great.
Oh yeah, and you know. The only thing I agree with what Trump did, I got no problem with them putting the flag at half-staff because Dolly was or is a national treasure.
Absolutely.
She was offered the Congressional Presidential Medal of Freedom. I've heard either twice by Trump, and I've heard one by Trump and one by President Biden. But she turned them down. Both of them. If it was 1-1. She was deserving of that, and then she could have pulled a Trump back in '91 when she went to Desert Storm and visited the troops. Remember when he went and flew in kind of into that one airport and said, "Oh, I deserve the Congressional Medal of Honor," So she could have done that, but she was always so humble and, like you said, self-deprecating on herself, and she just never had nothing bad to say.
Nope, she didn't. And man, in the world that she grew up in and became an adult in, it's not like she didn't have the opportunity to say bad things.
No, and then like you say with the books and that, because in honor of her dad and stuff like that she's given so many books, and I wonder how many people will be donating more, in honor of Dolly now.
I hope so. I hope so. That Imagination Library, I remember reading in the last couple years, because, she started it locally and then it got bigger and bigger. And I thought, tell me if this rings a bell for you, that there was part of Illinois that she had added to her Imagination Library. And I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, that might be new. That might be a new one on me, but I heard a large amount, and that, and like you say, with the shots during COVID and all of that stuff. So, I mean, she's just an angel. That's why I had to send you that one, and I got one more, and then I'll send you a couple more. Let me, others, I'm sure they want to let you know their feelings. Thanks, Joan. Good to hear you again.
Thank you so much. We need to take a break. We're going to get back to your calls right after this.
You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
For the first hour of the show, Monday through Thursday, we talk to you about the news of the day. Let's go to Ron, who's on the line from Chicago. Hey, Ron, how are you?
Okay, you don't sound as bad as RFK Jr.
Yeah, really. There's something to be proud of.
It's too bad that Dolly Parton and Elvis Presley didn't do a duet together. It's just imagine I'll always love you and love me tender.
Oh, God.
And this CIA director, John Ratcliffe, he went to Moscow to get Russia involved in the Strait of Hormuz, and they brushed him off. They didn't want anything.
There's a shock.
Last week was Cash Patel, now is the John Ratcliffe. So, and since Trump cannot get his name on the Kennedy Center, Little Donnie wants the Kennedy Center demolished and torn down because he says there's nobody going there anymore.
Yeah, I was reading about that. The DOJ is saying that, and this is according to Yahoo News, which posted this just a couple hours ago, that the Department of Justice is arguing that if President Donald Trump is not allowed to add his name to the Kennedy Center, then he, Trump, may have no choice but to raise the entire structure and start from scratch. So I guess when he thought he could have his name on it, it was okay. But now that his name is off of it, it's in such bad shape that it really needs to be torn down.
Yeah, that's what they have in the White House. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you much.
Thanks so much. Let's go to Andre, who's on the line from the South Side. Hey, Andre, how are you?
Hello, good afternoon to you, Miss Joan. Happy Hump Day to you. I hope you're doing okay, and you you and your family survived this storm that we've been having. But we're having some more storms here. It's called winter in America, and we got some trouble that we got to deal with. So I only got a couple of things that I want to talk with you about. The first one is Father Pfleger. The only thing that I want to say about Father Pfleger is that the hierarchy, the leadership in the Catholic Church needs to really consider letting the men and the women in the church date and have wives. I think it's unnatural and it's unreasonable to expect a man or woman to be celibate all of their lives. I never did feel like that was a reasonable thing to do. So they need to really look at that, and maybe some of these type of false accusations and misleading statements can be set aside. Second of all, I'm beginning to feel like this loyalty in the Republican Party, loyalty to Donald Trump, I'm beginning to really feel like it's a mental illness. And I say I feel like it's beginning to be a mental illness with their loyalties because what are they getting out of it? Donald Trump talks about these people, and they still be loyal to him. And I think that they don't have the intestinal fortitude to stand up. Why is it that Kim Jong-un and President Xi, and why is it the leaders in Canada, why can all the men all over the world and everywhere else, even in Iran, stand up to Donald Trump? But these Republicans right here in this country cannot stand up and defend the country against Donald Trump. It's just beginning to look like it's a mental illness to me. I can't understand how the Congress is a co-equal branch of government. The Congress controls the Army, the Navy, the military, the Air Force, the FBI, CIA, but yet they're afraid of Trump. And it just doesn't really look good. They need some mental help. You got people like Bill Cassidy, Tom Tillis, and a whole host of other Republicans and MAGA will not stand up to this man, and he done talked about them, talked about their wives.
It's insane, isn't it? I don't get it. The legislative branch is supposed to be a check on the power of the executive branch, and in Trump's first year and a half, all they've been is a rubber stamp, and to many of his worst ideas.
And I hope the Democrats don't let these Republican wives forget this stuff. They need to have commercials and everything say that these Republican men who you call men and your family have abandoned you, and they have left this country in bad shape for you and your kids and your grandkids to come. They need to stress that message, because that's not to mention that the debt that he's leaving for their kids and grandkids to pay. It was a problem when Joe Biden was there. All they talked about was their kids and grandkids having to pay their debt. Well, guess what? All of the money that was saved from Doge is gone, and your kids and your grandkids, Republicans, guess what? Your kids is going to have to pay for this war, and it's your fault because you didn't stand up to Donald Trump. You couldn't find the intestinal fortitude to hold this man in check, which is your constitutional right. You're a co-equal branch of government, like Joan said. When are you going to grow a spine and stand up? And I hope the Democrats don't let them just fade off into the sunset. Sorry, Miss Joan, but I'm frustrated.
Okay, Andre. I gotta move on because I'm going to try to get some more calls in. But I always appreciate it when you join the conversation. Let's go to Jeff, who is on the line in Chicago. Hey, Jeff.
Hello?
Hi. Thanks for the call today. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was down in Dollywood with my grandkids, must have been 3 years ago. And Dolly couldn't have been nicer. She took pictures, autographs. What a wonderful woman. It's
wow, so you actually got to meet her.
Yeah, oh yeah. She probably spent at least 5, 6, 7 minutes with my grandkids. Yeah. Anyway, the other reason I called is you had Stacey Gates on a week or so ago, and she wouldn't take any questions. Question I don't understand. Nobody ever asked about the under enrollment of all these schools. You know, right in Johnson's own backyard in Austin, there's Frederick Douglass High School. It's got 28 kids in it. Where is all the money coming from? Nobody asks these questions. You know, they don't. It's crazy. It's nuts. Do you agree?
I do agree that we do seem to have schools that are underperforming, understaffed, not enough students. And she made an allusion to the fact that, you know, we've kind of disrupted. We used to have a lot of busing, and it made it a lot easier for kids to get to these schools. And the money for busing has gone out the window. And I know, as I said, my daughter-in-law is a Chicago public school teacher, and she said that when there used to be busing, her school had twice the number of students it has now. But without busing, they can't get there.
Frederick Douglass High School is a high school within a 7-minute block that has 300 kids in it. Douglass High School has 28 kids with 26 CPS employees. This makes no sense. I mean, none at all. It's nuts. There's no accountability. None at all.
You're saying something that has been a complaint about the Chicago Public Schools for quite a while, and I do not know the individual schools, so I cannot comment competently on that. But I hear your argument, and I have heard it from other people that this is ridiculous. There was, and I think that it really does require a deep dive. It really does. Why is it that schools that had bustling enrollments before now don't? There's got to be a reason for that. And if we find that the reason is just that those neighborhoods don't have as many kids anymore, well, then, yeah, I'm right there with you about closing schools. But if there are other reasons, I'd like to find out what they are. And I maybe I should, there's a site called Chalkbeat. A lot of their reporting also gets printed in Block Club Chicago. And their whole existence is about education. And I'm going to see about getting somebody on from Chalkbeat who knows much, much more about this than I do. And maybe we can get some answers then. I'm making a note for myself right now. Hey, thanks for the idea, Jeff, and thanks for the call. Appreciate both very, very much. Let's go to our good friend Paul, who's on the line from Seattle. How you doing, Paul?
Hi, Joan. Well, forgive my saying so, but in my view, Donald Trump's false patronage of Dolly Parton is only for his own benefit.
Oh, well, of course.
And to prove that, I would suggest that we all start calling for a nomination for Dolly Parton to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. His patronage would dry up right quick.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
Dolly for the Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah. So anyway.
Except I think, isn't there a rule, Paul, that you can't get the Nobel Prize if you're dead? I think that's one award. Oh. If I'm remembering this correctly, I think that's one award that cannot be given posthumously. I'll look into that and make sure I know what I'm talking about here. But that's triggered a vague memory in my head.
We don't have to know what we're talking about. We're just trying to tweak Donald Trump.
That's right. Look at the big picture,
so,
Joan.
Send him out of his mind. And here's the other thing is that, and again, it's always a comparison. The love and light and warmth and humility of Dolly Parton versus just the hubris, arrogance, hard-heartedness, and absolute disgust of Donald Trump. But he thinks that he's got it in control of everything. He holds all the cards. But let me tell you, Mark Carney and the officials in Canada, they well know their options. And one of them that I thought of over a year ago when Trump first started was, you know what people know what an easement is in property. So you might have a parcel of property that's landlocked by other properties, and so if you want to get to your property, you have to have a driveway that goes across somebody else's property. Well, we have a kind of like that, only it's not an easement; it's just a pathway. So there is a road that goes from Washington State all the way out through British Columbia to Alaska. It's called the Alcan Highway. And a whole lot of American commercial truck traffic goes that way to supply Alaska with goods. And if the Canadians decide, you know what, we're about sick of you and your tariffs and all your crap, we're just going to close the Alcan Highway to American commercial truck traffic.
Yep.
You can still drive your car. Fine. No, we're not closing the highway. We're just saying no American truck traffic.
And
Alaska,
as people are finding out, a great deal of our electricity comes from Canada. If they shut that off, and, I don't know how specific they can be, but Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, said something about, maybe we should shut off the flow of electricity to red states who support Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, Canada could bring us to our knees in 24
Absolutely.
hours.
Well, Alaska would be screwed if they closed the LCAN. And I called Lisa Murkowski's office last summer before the big bill that she voted yes on, as long as her state didn't suffer cut to Medicaid. And I mentioned that. I said, because people are already, in the pubs and stuff in Canada, they're already talking about it. We ought to do this to the damn Americans, right? Damn Yankees. We ought to do this. We ought to do that. And the people know, because I texted, I have a friend that lives in BC. She used to live here. She's dual citizen. And I said, hey, Carol, you know what you guys should do? You guys should close the LCAN highway. She goes, no, we all know about that, Paul. That's all right. I mean, I said, you're already talking about it? She goes, oh, God, yeah. We've had a million ideas about how to mess with Trump. And it's just like, the Lisa Murkowski, the senator from Alaska, I called her office and I just left a message. Like I said, you better be careful following this guy, because your state's going to be screwed. And there's so many ways. Trump thought he was going to be clever by, opening the Gordon Bridge, which is the bridge across the Detroit River. And the reason he was doing that is because the old ambassador, Trump's Trump, I don't know, was a billionaire by the.
Paul, we're losing your signal, but that's okay because it's 3 o'clock and we got to get to the news. Thank you for the call. We'll be right back after the news.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you, from your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
When I get confused about what is going on in the court system, particularly the Supreme Court, and these days that's pretty much how I am 24/7. But one of the people who I like to turn to answer my questions and illuminate me is Professor Stephen Schwinn, who teaches law at the University of Illinois Chicago Law School. Stephen, thank you for returning again.
Joe, it's always my pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Well, I hope it continues to be your pleasure. I have been under the weather for the last 4 or 5 days and only been able to check what's going on in the world for brief periods of time before I went back to sleep for another 8 hours. But I've been reading stuff that confuses me about what is going on with mail-in balloting. And it's particularly important to me because I signed up, as you can in Illinois, for permanent mail-in balloting. So usually, 4 to 6 weeks before an election, my ballot shows up in the mail. I look it over. If there's something that confuses me, I do some research and then I fill it out and I take it directly to my post office and make them hand cancel it. And away we go. But I've been reading, Trump's trying to stop it. It's in the courts, and I'm not sure. The Supreme Court has made a ruling, but it's not a permanent ruling. It's like a ruling for now, and I'm very confused, Stephen. Can you straighten this out?
Joan, I can try, but I got to tell you, this is all very, very confusing. So this actually goes back to March of 2026. In March of 2026, President Trump issued an executive order that purported to regulate mail-in voting in all states across the country. And I just want to emphasize to listeners how important this is. Joan, like many people, you get a regular mail ballot in the mail before elections. Some states do their entire elections by balloting, mail-in balloting. And so this is a really big deal. What President Trump did was three things. He first ordered the Department of Homeland Security to compile a list of all eligible voters in every state, and then to convey that list to the states. And I just want to pause for a second on that. That's really weird. The federal government doesn't keep lists of registered voters under federal law and the Constitution. That's the responsibility of the states. And so right out of the gate, we've got some unusual kinds of behavior here. The second thing the order did was to direct the Attorney General to clamp down on certain election-related crimes. Now, that in and of itself doesn't seem alarming, but when we understand the first and what I'm about to describe as the third part of this executive order, it actually is quite alarming. So the third part of the order orders the United States Postal Service to figure out the design of envelopes for mail-in balloting and to require states to comply with that particular design. And then also it requires states to register with the Postal Service all the qualified voters in the state. Then finally what it says is the Postal Service can't deliver any mail-in ballots that don't comport with the design that the Postal Service created and don't cover a person who is on the list that the state submitted to the Postal Service. Now, even as I'm describing that, I hope you and listeners can understand how many possible errors can occur in this system. It's kind of head-spinningly complex, and it is because this isn't the sort of thing the federal government ordinarily does. In fact, it never does this kind of thing. Elections are left to the states, not the federal government. So that's the kind of backstory. Now, a couple of cases emerged in federal court. The federal court initially ruled that the executive order was illegal, unconstitutional, and that the president exceeded his authority in issuing it. The government took the case up to the Supreme Court and said, we're not going to make an argument about the underlying merits of the executive order, but we are going to argue that the states who sued, and Illinois was one of these states, that the states who sued lack standing and that the case isn't ripe. And what that means is that the states were unable to demonstrate that they would suffer the kind of harm that would allow them to sue in federal court because the Postal Service hadn't yet implemented its regulatory scheme and DHS hadn't yet compiled its list. Basically, the states filed too soon. And on Monday, the Supreme Court agreed and allowed the Postal Service and Department of Homeland Security to go ahead. Now, most recently, just this afternoon, the states refiled a new case, lodging a new challenge based on regulations that the United States Postal Service actually has now promulgated. And I think they've got a much better case at this point for standing and ripeness, and we'll kind of see where it goes from here.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't voting supposed to be the purview of the states? I know that, the Postal Service, I guess, is federal. So if you're going to mess with voting, I guess you'd have to use an avenue like that. But this seems like it's messing with voting. And it seems like the states could just go to the court and say, hey, they're messing with voting. And that's this is the Supreme Court wants everything to be about states' rights, states' rights. No, there's no Roe v. Wade. It's all up to the states. Shouldn't this be the same thing? Whoa, no, it's all up to the states.
Joan, you're exactly right. And that's what the Constitution provides in the Elections Clause, the Electors Clause, and the fundamental right to vote, that states have the primary responsibility for regulating the vote. And under two federal laws, the National Voter Registration Act and the Help America Vote Act, states are actually charged with keeping and maintaining their voter lists, not the federal government, the states. Now, the Elections Clause in the Constitution does say that if Congress wants to enact a law to regulate the times, places, and manner of federal elections, that Congress can do that. The emphasis here is on Congress can do that. The president has no unilateral authority whatsoever to do this, and that's exactly what the states were arguing. Now, my own view is that they've got a really good case on the merits. The problem is that the government hasn't defended this on the merits yet. It's simply said that the states lack standing and that their case isn't ripe, and they've succeeded on that ground alone. If and when the courts do come to the merits of the case, basically the argument that you outlined, I think the courts are much more likely to rule in favor of the plaintiffs and to say that this executive order is illegal.
Does it? Oh, yeah, shoot, we've got a break. When we come back, I want to ask you about this whole idea of standing. Are they being picky? Should the states have known that if it hasn't been put into effect, they can't oppose it? Or were they? I don't know. It seems like we're really in the weeds here looking at the fine print. Professor Schwinn and I will be back to try to make a little more sense out of this right after this.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Professor of Law Stephen Schwinn, he's at the University of Illinois at Chicago, is trying to explain to me this recent Supreme Court ruling on the Trump administration effort to mess around with mail-in balloting. And if I understood you correctly, part of the reason why the Trump administration has been successful so far is because their argument was, the states with their lawsuit, they jumped the gun. They filed a lawsuit against something that officially hadn't even really begun yet, and that can't be fair. And the Supreme Court agreed with them. Is that unusual? Because, is it unusual to file a challenge to something that is just being moved through the gears and hasn't officially begun? It seems like we're getting really picky here.
Oh, Joan, we are getting super picky here. No, this isn't unusual at all. Organizations, states, people will file what we call a pre-enforcement challenge on a regular basis. And this wasn't even a pre-enforcement challenge. The states are faced with an imminent, impending midterm election. They've got to start to mail out these mail-in ballots that you'll receive within a matter of weeks. And so they really are in a pinch here. The Trump administration effectively gamed the system in the way that it set up this litigation. And I'm going to try to describe this as clearly as I can. So the Trump administration, pretty late in the game, came to the idea that it was going to implement these regulations to go ahead and enforce the executive order. Now, as soon as it started to move to do that, the states sued. And they said, well, look, if the Trump administration is actually going to do this, we need to start ramping up things very, very quickly because we have an election coming up in the fall. And moreover, based on the way this thing is designed, it sounds like there are going to be a lot of mistakes, and the states are going to need to be prepared to deal with those mistakes. And so the state said, we've actually been sufficiently harmed. What the Supreme Court said was, you haven't been harmed in the way that you need to be harmed to get into federal court because we still don't understand exactly how the Trump administration is going to implement and enforce this executive order. And moreover, and Joan, you're going to love this, moreover, the Trump administration in the executive order wrote that the DHS and USPS should only comply with it insofar as it complies with existing law. And the Supreme Court read that language and said, well, look, the administration itself is saying that it's binding itself to actual law, and so therefore we don't expect it to act illegally, and therefore we don't expect it to harm the states in the way that they're saying. just kind of crazy town reasoning, in my view. And so that's a problem on the front end, but it gets even more complicated and more in the weeds on the back end. So the problem that the Supreme Court and the Trump administration has set up for the states is that they can't sue to stop this kind of thing too early, because if they do, they won't be able to demonstrate the kind of harm that they need to get into federal court for the reasons that we've talked about. But on the other hand, they can't sue too late. And here's why. The Supreme Court, in a different line of cases, developed a principle, a kind of doctrine that we call the Purcell principle after a Supreme Court case called Purcell. What this principle says is that federal courts shouldn't change state election rules too close to an election, even if those rules violate the Constitution, because that'll create voter confusion. And so we're now on top of this election. And so can the states sue now, or are we too close to the election to change this rule that President Trump put into play? And so between the standing and ripeness pieces on the front end and the Purcell principle on the back end, the states have a narrow window when to sue. And they don't really even know when this window occurs because the Supreme Court hasn't really specified it. So again, they filed another lawsuit this afternoon now looking at the new USPS regulations, and I think they're in a much better position to demonstrate that they're going to be harmed by this new regulation that actually is going into place and will allow the courts very quickly, I hope, to get to the merits of this. But, Joan, I mean, you mentioned it, and you're exactly right. All of this is creating confusion. Many commentators, myself included, think that that's the point.
People confused, and then they won't know what to do. And if they always vote by mail and aren't set up like me to get it automatically, they have to actually make an effort to it. Maybe they just won't. I understand that. And let me back up a second, because you said one of the things the Supreme Court pointed to was that the government said, well, this is what we want to do, but we'll basically only do it within the confines of what is legal. And okay, if you're going to just follow the law, then why try to change this, the way people mail in ballot anyway? If you're going to follow the law already exists, so just go home.
Joan, I love talking to you. You cut right to the chase. That is exactly right. You put your finger exactly on it. If they're going to comply with the law anyway, just comply with the law. You don't need a new executive order to do it. Now, the Supreme Court has been using this kind of language as a sort of get-out-of-jail-free card for the Trump administration. And the Trump administration has learned from Supreme Court rulings that if it includes in an executive order language that says we're only going to enforce this so long as it's consistent with existing law, the administration knows that that's basically a way to get around any court holding it up from doing what it wants to do.
I understand the idea of doing what you need to do to get your idea put into place, but it feels icky when somebody is like twisting the law and looking for the right wording to create a loophole. It doesn't feel like the law is supposed to be straightforward, and it's supposed to be honest, and it's supposed to be clear. And this feels like a backroom deal kind of way to get what you want. Not that that's going to affect anybody, and not that they care, but it's just repugnant to me.
It is, and this is a point that Justice Jackson made in a dissent that she wrote for herself in the case on Monday. It's really worth reading, and I would urge readers to take a look if you get an opportunity. She calls the court out on this, and she says, look, the Trump administration is basically playing the courts, and the Supreme Court is in on the game. And we just can't do that. We can't be in that business. The Trump administration shouldn't be doing this. It raises all kinds of red flags for the courts, and we really should be calling them to the carpet on this kind of tactic.
But they're not.
But they're not.
Some people who have been writing recently have been writing things about John Roberts that, because initially it seemed like maybe he would be the person to bridge the liberal and the conservative, but it's turned out that he's just as conservative as the rest of them. And I've been reading, like, articles that are like, why are you surprised about John Roberts? This is always who he's been. This is always what he has wanted to accomplish. So, don't say you're disappointed in him, because he's doing what we all knew he would do. How do you feel about that?
I think that's spot on. I mean, this is somebody who has a public record going all the way back to the 80s that demonstrates exactly what he's wanted to do and what his agenda is as a justice and chief justice of the Supreme Court. And we really shouldn't be surprised by anything that he does. I think, the folks who say that John Roberts is an institutionalist and that he's part of a kind of middle wing on the court that's not quite as conservative as others on the court, I think what they're looking to is the far right wing of the court, where you do really have some unusually conservative justices in the form of Justice Alito and Thomas, for example. And by comparison, Justice Roberts is more moderate. That's true, but still very, very conservative.
More moderate than the most extreme human beings on the face of the earth is not a compliment.
No, it's not a place I'd want to find myself, but I think that's where he is. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just what's going on with the court right now is very, very frustrating. And again, when I first was doing this show years ago, and I would talk to people about the idea of expanding the Supreme Court. And virtually every Supreme Court expert I talked to was like, no, you don't want to do that, and here's why, and blah, blah, blah. In the last couple of years, those conversations have changed when I've talked to people, particularly lawyers who become journalists and report on the Supreme Court. And more I'm hearing the only way in our lifetime to see different rulings is to expand the court. Yes, reform is necessary, and that's great. But the assumption seems to be that any reforms passed will not affect the current Supreme Court. They'll be grandfathered in. So if you really, really want to see a Supreme Court that more accurately reflects the people of this country, you have no choice but to expand the court. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't disagree that we ought to be looking seriously at court expansion or court reform or both. I want to remind listeners that there are other ways that Congress can affect what's going on at the Supreme Court. Congress has tremendous power over the court. It funds the court. It can set the Supreme Court's appellate jurisdiction. It can even, if it wants to, tell the court that it can't hear cases. This is pretty expansive power that Congress has, and if Congress has the political will to exercise it, it really could effect deep and lasting change at the Supreme Court. The problem here really is one of political will. We haven't seen a Congress that's willing to take these measures, and I'm not sure that we will anytime soon.
Okay, but if Congress passes these laws, this court reform, and conservatives find some way to have standing to appeal it, and it works its way to the Supreme Court, I mean, come on. They're going to take a look at this and they're going to say, oh, yeah, well, it's a good idea, but they didn't put the periods in the right place in the sentences. Therefore, we're going to overturn this law. I mean, how do you rein in a court that seems to have the final word on any law passed?
Well, I'll tell you what I do, and if there are any legislators listening, I'd be happy to advise on this. I'd write a law that reforms the court and then specifically divests the Supreme Court of appellate jurisdiction over a ruling on that law, which Congress can do. And that would mean that the law would go into effect, and that Congress could divest not only the Supreme Court, but the lower courts of jurisdiction to hear challenges to the law. And we'd have no judicial oversight on that law.
Well, any legislators that are out there listening, please, please, please. I talk to a lot of Congress people on a fairly regular basis. I'm going to tell them they need to talk to you. I really, seriously, because this can't go on. Any good that we try to do, I mean, Joe Biden tries to get rid of student debt. and somehow that's not acceptable. That's a bad executive order, but all of Trump's executive orders are good. Come on. It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, I have chatted with you far too long. We have gone past our time, which usually happens when I talk to you, Stephen. But thank you for being here. Professor Stephen Joan from the University of Illinois, Chicago School of Law. Thanks again.
Joan, always a great pleasure. Thank you.
We're going to take a break and be back with more after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Retired former Major General Randy Manner joins us from time to time to talk about what is going on with this American military of ours. Randy, I saw that clip from that, was it a podcast, a panel discussion that you did? Yes. And your language about Pete Hegseth has become very clear, if I might be so bold as to say. First of all, welcome. I hope you have been well recently. And why did you decide to be so blunt about Mr. Hegseth? Well, first, you probably should tell the audience how you feel about Mr. Hegseth.
Well, I think I have been very public about this, that I really do think he is a clear and present danger to the national security of the United States. He has done more to degrade our military than any other foreign power. We now stand with only 1/3 to maybe as much as 2/3 at the very most of our defensive weapons and our offensive capability. He is literally draining the treasury of the Defense Department for this war that has not been approved by Congress. So our readiness is dropping. He is purging all of our best leaders and putting in, quite frankly, leaders that are literally now aligned with him and with the president, which for your listeners, the military should not be aligned with any president. They are aligned with the Constitution of the United States, not with a political leader. And now he has changed it. The Army Chief of Staff acting Chief of Staff is the latest example where they fired General George and they put in a person who, while capable, he was essentially relieved from being the 82nd Airborne Division commander. And now he's the darling of the administration. And I hate to say this, this Secretary of Defense has, again, unbelievable. He is degrading us left and right. We are no longer the strongest military that we were even a year ago.
Well, on one of those points, Pete Hegseth said he didn't know that we were running out of munitions. Randy, he didn't know. Steve Feinberg didn't tell him. Steve Feinberg, by the way, guys, is the number 2 under Pete Hegseth. And apparently he saw that we were running out of munitions and just decided to keep it a secret from everyone, as of course your number 2 does. I mean, it's just so unbelievable that he would even make that argument. But apparently Donald Trump bought it.
Well, remember, if you suck up enough to the narcissistic leader of our country, then anything that you say will be believed by that person, as long as it's in praise of him. The reality is, heck, I knew it. The press knew it. We, quite frankly, people in the national defense area, they knew we were really starting to get in bad shape. So all he's doing is trying to shoot someone else and blame them for his own shortfalls.
Absolutely, he is. And I was reading about this. Christopher, I don't know how you say his name, Laniv, who is now the acting chief of staff for the Army. Is that correct?
That's correct.
One interesting thing that I was reading is that the Trump administration is, at least not anytime soon, going to nominate him to be in that role because Republicans have told the White House that they hate him. And it doesn't look like his chances of confirmation are very good at all. Explain to me, I was reading this too about how he had a very high role and then he wasn't kicked out, but he was demoted and now he's promoted again and he's everybody's darling. Explain that to me a little bit more. I don't have a solid grasp of what went down.
Well, unfortunately, I don't either. I do know that under normal presidents, he probably would have been retired by now, very likely. In contrast, his political beliefs align with the president's, and therefore that is why this guy is now moved up so rapidly. Remember, he was the senior military aide to the Secretary of Defense, and because he was handpicked to be in that role, he has been, quote unquote, the darling of the administration ever since. No offense to this officer, but the reality is anytime that you are viewed as being the darling of this kind of a president, that by itself is a danger sign. And it's a red flag for the rest of the military, the rest of our country. We do not align ourselves at all with a Secretary of Defense or with the president. We align ourselves, again, with the Constitution. We are supposed to be apolitical, and this guy clearly is not.
Yeah. Well, that's what you predicted a million years ago when you and I were on the radio. You said that the military leaders that you knew would stand up to Trump and would stand up to Hegseth. Right. Your fear was that they would keep firing people or making people retire until they got to a level where people would say yes. And that certainly seems to be what's happened. I mean, I was just reading this morning, I can't remember if the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, about how so much of the leadership of the army is gone. And the question, the person that must have been an op-ed was saying, like if they really need to, wage a war or get their act together, we're not sure that they have the leadership and the experience left.
Well, the best way for me to say this is two comments. First of all, I really wish I had been wrong about this prediction a year and a half ago. This was actually back when you and I first met at the DNC talking about what could happen. And of course, everyone was saying that, literally was saying, oh, you are worst casing it and everything else. I'm going, no, this is not business as usual. And now we are seeing it in all situations. So that's number one. Number two is that we are now an army that doesn't have the A players. We don't have the B players. We have the C players in many of the senior positions. Not all, but the point is at the very top, as I mentioned before, we have a chairman of the Joint Chief who was a very qualified 3-star Air National Guardsman, but absolutely had no qualifications to be the chief of staff, to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And yet here he is. So we have now the C players in our military. And this is very frightening because why do we want to go to war with people who are not the very best that America has to offer? It's just, I see it and it pains me greatly.
If we get a Democrat in the White House in 2028, would you expect any of the people who have been forced out or fired or forced into retirement, could those people come back, do you think? Or
Yes, they would be permitted to come back. They can be recalled to active duty extremely easily, especially if they are willing. That's the important point. The Chief of Staff of the Army back, I'm not sure if it was 99 or 2000, they did recall a retired 4-star to be the Chief of Staff of the Army. So there is a precedent for this. And particularly because these are unusual times, it's very, very easy to say, would you like to come back and to serve, to continue to serve? I would imagine not only will there be a correction within our military where some of these people who were extremely politically aligned across our military, that they would be retired very quickly. There would be the opportunity to ask people to come back. But you're talking about rebuilding a military while the plane is flying. And our adversaries know it.
Oh, it's terrifying. There's so much more I want to talk to you about. We need to take a break. I'm talking to retired Major General Randy Manner. We'll be right back after this.
Because facts matter. You are listening to WCPT 820.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Retired Major General Randy Manor is here. He is part of a group called National Security Leaders for America, a group that has been speaking out about what is going on with our military right now. And I don't know if it's just my feed, but lately, I mean, for a while, Randy, it was like you were the only person that I knew in this group that was like regularly being interviewed and speaking out. But now all of a sudden, I'm seeing all these posts from some of your fellow retired, high-ranking military folks who are speaking out. It seems like, to me, that's reflective of the fact that we're living in a 5-alarm fire. And my only hope is that even Leneve would have enough sense to tell Hegseth that Donald Trump can't use nuclear weapons, for God's sake. Though apparently that's something that he has been flirting with for quite a while. To me, it feels like a 5-alarm fire. How does it feel to you, Randy?
Yes, it feels that way as well. And two other comments. The Army, fortunately, does not have nuclear weapons. Only the Air Force and the Navy have those. So it's important for all your listeners to understand. I still hope and believe there are fail-safes about that particular issue, which is a big one. I also wanted to say that it's very, very important that all your listeners who have sons, daughters, husbands, wives, nephew, nieces in the military, that our men and women in uniform, they're dedicated to protect us. All of our junior enlisted soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and they deserve our continued support and respect, and that they are really the best of America. So we need to make sure to honor them as we go forward. And what is happening at the very top of our country relative to the president, the SecDef, and the purging of our senior military officers, we need to stand up and to tell our congressmen, no matter whether it's blue or red, we need to tell them, no, stop it. Because remember, Congress confirms these promotions, not the president. The president can nominate, but the Congress holds the key. We know that many of the Republican senators have been, quite frankly, they're just as treacherous, quite frankly, as the president in this. The reality is some of them, a few of them, are changing their minds. So I again encourage everyone to call your congressman, whether it's a senator or representative, and tell them how you feel. And remember, that number again is 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121, and then to ask to speak to your representative. And that way someone will take your call and then you can express your opinion and let your voice be heard.
Yes, I think that's something that people should do on a regular basis. You should know who your state rep, your state senator, your congressperson, your senators. You should know all those folks and, create a Word document on the desktop of your computer with everybody's phone number or everybody's email address. And with some of these elected officials, and more all the time, you can go to their website, which they most likely have, and there will even be a form that you can fill out. If for some reason you're terrified of actually talking to somebody, there'll be a form that you can fill out to send to them to weigh in on issues of the day.
Yes.
I was reading just this morning that apparently Defense Secretary Hegseth has decided that we do not need a specialized group of military folks who learn everything there is to know about drone warfare. That we don't need that. We don't need that. And you and I were talking a while back, and I was asking you, this is clearly the way warfare is evolving. Why are we so far behind? And you said, well, that takes the military a while to kind of wrap their head around a new idea. Looks like somebody did, and now they're undoing it.
So this defies logic. I'm in shock. This is something where, here's a great example. The acting chief of staff of the Army went ahead and canceled the program at the request of the defense secretary. And I don't have any idea Even General Petraeus in the New Yorker wrote a great article saying that, I mean, here we have a very senior and seasoned combat officer saying, what the crap? Drones are the way that we are moving. And quite frankly, we've got to get on board and figure this out. I have said on numerous media platforms that the Ukrainians are the best in the world. Remember, the Secretary of Defense himself rejected any help from this whenever the Ukrainian president offered assistance, because, of course, we're the United States and we know everything. Correction. I'm the Secretary of Defense and I'm the president and I know everything. In Ukraine, you don't know anything. The reality is the Ukrainians are the best in the world in this, and we need to get on board. This is a perfect example of something to call your congressman about, congresswoman, and the idea of putting in the email, whatever it might be, and say, keep that battalion and let's do it, because we have got to start thinking more innovatively. We've got to be able to be more agile. This is why one of the key reasons why we have been totally ineffective in the Middle East, because we don't get it and we're not willing to understand what it takes to be more agile. And when I say we, I don't mean the United States. I mean this administration. They don't want to adapt. They literally want to feed these $10 million, $12 million missile. These defense contractors that produce them at $10 to $12 million a pop, instead of a drone that only costs literally $50,000.
Okay, I'm when it comes to the military, my knowledge is, shall we say, very limited in what people do, how they do it, how they strategize. But a Looney Tune like me can see this, that, we've got now, regular air drones, we've got sea drones, we've got underwater drones, we've got drones in Ukraine that act as ambulances. And we've seen in Iran, we're taking out $60,000 drones with a $2 million missile. And that doesn't make any sense. I can see it, Randy, and I know almost nothing. How does this escape the highest echelons of power?
Well, okay, wait. I got to be very clear here. You see it. A lot of the listeners see it. I see it. Our military, quite frankly, the average man and woman in uniform sees it. Yet this is not the way, apparently, which I do not understand. It makes no sense to me, except for, of course, that would admit that you're wrong, right? The administration does not see it. And again, that gets back into that we are being led by civilian leadership that don't have the best interests of the United States at heart. They don't. I mean, just like on and on, the president says, oh, you know what? $1 a gallon is the small price to pay to not have the Iranians have a nuclear weapon, even though he himself said that we destroyed it twice over already. So either he's lying that we destroyed it, or he's lying that he's trying to make an excuse. So if you are a Trump supporter, you have to choose which statement do you accept as truth, that we destroyed it, which, quite frankly, they didn't have it, but we destroyed it, or, the president's lying why we're still there. So you have to pick your truths. And unfortunately, I'm hoping that the average American who thinks about this for more than just a few minutes says this administration is only out there to make themselves richer.
Do you think that's
during an interview I made
go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think your audio dropped out for a second. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So one of the things I wanted to say was I was doing a pre-recorded session last week, and I said that the president is $1 billion richer in his first year of his administration. And in the room, they had a fact checker to make sure that whatever I said was accurate. And during a break, they called a break and they said, sir, your number's not right. And I'm thinking, I thought I was being conservative. He says, you were. The number is $2.9 billion richer personally. And I went, wait, what? Yeah. And so you have a president. Now think about this, please. Everyone listen for a moment. You have a president who is $2.9 billion, and I thought it was $1 billion, in his first year of presidency. On what planet does that make any sense of propriety or appropriateness whatsoever? No president in history has ever personally made himself and his family richer to this degree than this president right here. while in office, by the way. I am shocked at the corruption. I'm shocked. I shouldn't be, but I am.
Well, the only reason that Donald Trump has been able to get that rich and make his stupid crypto bank legal with, and getting rid of a lot of the regulations on crypto and having companies pay $100,000 a month to get the insider information about what he's going to post so they know what the stock market and their companies are going to do. I mean, the only reason that exists is because the legislative branch is allowing it. There is nobody who stands up to him, and even the people who he crushes, Tom Tillis, John Cornyn, Bill Cassidy, they pretend to stand up to him for a minute. Oh, I might not vote for this person. Oh, wait, never mind. I will. Yeah. I don't understand. Like Bill Cassidy, he's an older guy. He doesn't need another job. He's got money. Donald Trump has ended his political career. Why is even someone like that seems to be utterly unable to say no to Donald Trump? And that's why, when nobody will tell you no, especially as somebody like him, of course he's going to push it and push it and push it. So what can I get away with today?
Right. Absolutely. Well, it's the bottom line is absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's exactly what we are seeing. When I first met you a couple of years ago, I had said that it's very likely that this president, if he was elected, would actually start to dismantle the concepts of democracy, and he is doing it every day. And you can see even with his new postal service regulations about what to deliver for mail-in ballots, this is actually the stealing of the election beyond belief. Mm-hmm. And he's using all the tools he can to disrupt and to make sure he does not lose the House. Yeah. That's how serious this is.
Yeah. Can he federalize the National Guard to say that they need to be at polling places? Of course, why should he bother? He could just send ICE. He doesn't have to worry about those pesky governors then.
Well, so the simple answer is for Republican-led states with a Republican governor, all he has to do is to ask them to deploy their own National Guard, where he will pay for them, the president will pay for them, to those blue cities that could obviously impact an election, like Atlanta, for example. So that is an easy ask, and the president could get away with it fast. For blue states, what he would have to do is he would have to do the Insurrection Act and say, we are under attack by China. Just spin the wheel and pick an enemy that he makes up. We're under attack by a foreign power, and therefore to secure the election, we are going to grab ballot boxes and we're going to grab voting machines as a result. But it would be very tactical with only those areas where literally where there is a potential loss of the House or Senate for him. So it's too easy, and it's very likely.
So what I was thinking is, what if we see the FBI showing up again and saying, oh, we believe that there were shenanigans and we have to take all your voting materials. And frankly, the results are probably going to be null and void. And, we may not even schedule another election. But if the FBI shows up, do you just lock the doors and drop the blinds and hope they go away? I mean, will local police or state police stand up to the FBI? I mean, it just seems like it's a disaster waiting to happen.
Well, you have the president's own personal attorney as the Attorney General of the United States. And I will tell you, it is my blunt opinion that if the president asks him to go seize ballot boxes, he will do it. And he'll use the FBI to make it happen. So now you're asking me a question about what would states do or cities do to resist. And I just don't know the answer to that. That's not an area that I have expertise in. I do believe, because again, absolute power corrupts absolutely, that it's very likely this is going to happen. And I certainly hope it's not. We as citizens have to stay agile. We've got to stay involved. Or if we do nothing, this will happen to us.
Yeah, that's my fear. And I don't know. I think, he does these test runs, and it occurs to me that what happened in Georgia with the FBI suddenly showing up And there was recently, for one of the primaries, the Department of Justice sent groups of 2 and 3 people who were poll watchers, and they just sort of, it was, from everything I read, they didn't talk to anybody, they just sort of lurked. They walked around and they looked, and they were able to get into the main area where people were voting. And then a week or 2 later, there were more primaries and more DOJ people showed up, and those election officials shut the door. They said that they could, like any other political person, they could walk around 100 feet from the entrance, but they couldn't come closer and they couldn't come inside. So maybe we are learning a little bit about how to deal with this.
Now, remember that these poll watchers from the Department of Justice, that is something that has existed for many, many decades. So it's not just this administration. It's just the fact that this administration may be weaponizing it compared to other administrations. So your listeners have to understand this is kind of the way it has been. It's just the fact they're saying they're going to get up to 2,000 people to do it. I'm not sure how they're going to recruit them, except for if they offer huge amounts of money like they do with ICE. But anyway, look, we need to stay vigilant. We need to stay active. We need to be involved. You can't let things happen to you. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. And, maybe if they do recruit civilians, maybe I could sign up. And then I could be taking notes and have recording conversations and doing interviews with them. That would be good.
There you go.
There you go.
But the fact that you said it, you might not get that job. But you know what? It's always worth a try.
Hey, a woman activist applied to be an ICE agent. And even though she didn't fill out the rest of the paperwork they asked her for, they sent her an email giving her start date. And she said, anybody who Googled me would immediately find out who I am and who I represent. I didn't fill out the paperwork, and I still got a job offer. So I don't know, Randy, I think I could make it.
You know what? Go for it, Joan. Go for it. I love it. I love it.
Okay. Randy Manner, thank you so much for being here. I love our chats.
Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. We are going to break for news. We'll be back with more after this.
Hey, where's Hal Sparks? I'm not sure where he is now, but I know where you can find him Saturdays at 11. He'll be right here on WCPT 820 for the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. Hey, Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Quite frankly, I get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
I'd love to welcome back political science professor Suzanne Chad from North Central College. Suzanne, how have you been?
Oh, you know what? I'm doing okay, Joan. I'm back in the classroom, which is always my happy place. How about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I mean, I was kind of sick for the last 4 days, but I have, as they say, turned a corner. Excuse me, mostly.
Good. Oh, no.
Yeah, I got a text at one point about the hour into the show, and it was like, ooh, your voice is going. Are you going to be here tomorrow? And I was like, hell yes. Unless it goes completely, I'm here.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about, well, there's so many things. I know that you particularly look at what's happening in this country politically, and I do want to get to some weirdness there. But one of the things that has really amazed me today is the outpouring for Dolly Parton. I mean, the fact that the Knights Guard in Buckingham Palace was playing one of her songs, and I mean, I was thinking about this, and obviously I've been around for a while. Dolly's been around for a while, and I really can't think of any scandal, any negative, really seriously negative publicity. That is, especially in these days, it's like she wasn't even real, Yeah,
this one was a hard one. I think women of my generation in particular who grew up with her music and her movies, and what I was surprised by were my students today. When we do current events, the first thing one of them said was, I'd like to talk about Dolly Parton passing away.
Wow.
A whole new right. I mean, we could have talked about any number of things, and that was the first thing that came up. And what struck me about the conversation was mostly sort of a little bit of what you said, which is the student saying, like, she was about the only person in the country that everyone could agree on without fighting, that she was joy and she was philanthropy. And she was, people tried to put her in a political box, both in interview with her, but also in speculation about her. And she was never interested in that. And she never took the bait, because she was about community and love and uplifting. And I think when someone like that light dims, when we don't have much of that light right now, it just feels a little bit extra hard. It feels a little extra sad today, for sure.
What did your student want to say about Dolly Parton?
So a couple of the remarks. The first was, sort of sad that her presence will no longer be felt because of the things that she did from the background, right? The silent things, paying for students' college tuition, the library initiatives, right? Her philanthropy that she did in silence because she wanted no recognition, that, hopefully her family, and I presume they will continue on with those things, but that there was some sadness. A couple of students remarked about her ability to bring people together through those acts. And then others were interesting, talking about, resurfaced clips of reporters trying to pit her against Whitney Houston for her song. And, that these things are coming up, even some of the media coverage is trying to stir up something when really all there is just sort of mourning and love. And that's what the students mostly wanted to talk about today.
And, I have never been somebody who's listening to Alex Perlman's podcast. He has like 1.5 million followers, but he posted something on social media that I thought was so beautiful. And it was like, Dolly Parton could have been a billionaire if that's what she wanted to do. But instead, she's created this imagination library, and to date, it's sent out something like 300 million books to kids. And everybody who worked at Dollywood, I remember reading that their kids all went to college on Dolly. That was part of the deal. And I mean, she just, you look at somebody like a Jeff Bezos or an Elon Musk or a Peter Thiel, and they seem so venal by comparison. What am I going to do with my billions? Well, we're going to go to Mars, or I'm going to build a rocket, or I'm going to accumulate all the data of every human being in the world.
Yeah. And some of that is reflected a little bit in, you see, like Jeff Bezos's ex-wife and, Melinda Gates. But what are they doing with their money? Where are they putting their money? Listen, you know me, I would talk about gender all day, but there is something to say about, we've just talked about 3 women who have done and are doing things very differently than their male counterparts, or what men typically are doing with their money, which is about hoarding it. But Dolly was about community. She knew the power of community from the way she was raised and how she created her own family. And all she wanted to do was bring people together, and the rising tide lifts all boats, right? That's what I think of when I think of Dolly.
Yeah. Speaking of another woman in the news who's gotten a lot of attention, please explain to me why Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's posts about freezing her eggs have been so wildly popular, so talked about, so shared. I mean, one of my girlfriends who has a daughter who's in her late 20s, she said, my daughter is just riveted by these. And on the one hand, she said, it's kind of educational for young women because everybody kind of talks around the subject, but she's like day by day, today I'm doing this shot, and today I'm doing this, and today I feel like this. But politically, why has MAGA lost its collective mind over this?
There's so many things going on here. You just sort of started with the first one, which is important, which is sort of putting this out of the shadows. There's such stigma associated with the way in which a woman builds her family if she chooses to build a family, and all of the physical, emotional, and mental things that go along with that. So her putting it out there is destigmatizing it, it's educating, and I think in some ways it's giving permission that even a woman who's serving in Congress and has aspirations, it's okay. She also wants to protect her ability to have a child at some point, that it's okay to want all of those things as opposed to choosing. So I think for every generation of women, that's important. On the political part of it, I think there's some interesting things that for those of us that study it that are looking for signals, right? And I'm wondering if some on the right are looking at the same signals, which is, I think we all know that she has some amount of what we call progressive ambition. She wants to be more than a House member. When that is and what that looks like is debatable. But I think her journey to potential motherhood signals there might be an aspiration to be president because we do expect that a woman, if she's ever president, is a mother. We just expect it of women in general. We would be suspect of a woman who didn't have children. And so it's sending a message that she values that motherhood as a way that might be some political signaling. Aside from her true want to potentially have a child, it does send some political signaling on, where she might be thinking ahead a bit, perhaps.
I have a theory about her that is not mainstream, and you may decide to poke some holes into it, but I think she's smart enough to know that in this current world we live in here in the United States, that there is too much prejudice, too much misogyny to ever elect a woman to high office. But she also knows that the conservative MAGA world is obsessed with her. I remember an interview she did, I don't know how long ago, and somebody asked her, well, are you going to run for Senate? And she said, a lot of people seem to be confused. She said, I don't want to run for, I want to make things happen. If I can, I want to bring about, health care for all and all of this. So it's not like, oh, my goal is to be senator. She said, my goal is what I can accomplish. But I think she knows that the right is obsessed with her. And I think whenever there's any presidential talk, I think she does it to mess with them.
I think whether that's the main goal or not, I think it does give her joy, right? I mean, she's never shied away from being a lightning rod or focal point for the further right or just sort of Republicans in Congress in general, right? She's never shied away from the scrutiny that she gets for her sheer existence. When she's been called all of the names up and down and has given speeches on the floor, she talks about that misogyny. She talks about also the racism because she is a woman of color. And she doesn't shy away from recognizing and naming that it makes it harder for her to ascend through politics. Yet, nevertheless, she persists, right, to bring another woman kind of back into the conversation. And so I think, yes, she knows that drives maybe men on the right crazy in particular because she hasn't been scared away from doing the good work of public service because she's motivated by public service. And if this potential political signaling with the story of her preserving her reproductive future makes them nervous because of what she might consider doing, I mean, men are often nervous about women who are making what could be soft or hard power plays. And so I guess that's not necessarily surprising, but from her in particular, to your point, she does drive that part of those certain people, that part of the party, she drives them crazy.
I want to talk with you more about misogyny in this country when it comes to the people we elect to office. I'm talking to political science professor Suzanne Chaud from North Central College. We will be right back after this.
WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter.
Hey, it's Joan Esposito, and I want to tell you about 120 Life. 120 Life is a drink made with ingredients that help support healthy blood pressure. My mom struggled with high blood pressure for almost her entire adult life, and for many of us, high blood pressure runs in the family. 120 Life is a great tasting fruit and vegetable drink designed to improve your blood pressure. Put it to the test for a couple of weeks. Check your blood pressure. See if it works for you. Some people have reported results in as little as 2 weeks. And if you like a fruit drink that isn't overly sugary, 120 Life is good on that count as well. To try it, go online to 120life.com. That's 120life.com. If your high blood pressure doesn't come down in 2 weeks, you can get a full refund. And you can get 20% off your order. Use the code JOAN, Joan, and you'll get 20% off your order. These statements have not been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Joining me is political science professor Suzanne Chod from North Central College, and I want to talk about misogyny. Recently, as you know, as the belief is that about 5 seconds after the midterms are over, assuming that, you know, once everybody gets out of jail and everybody puts down their guns, then the presidential race is going to begin. And so I've been talking to a number of people who are current or former Democratic strategists about that. And the one thing that I say to all of them is Pete Buttigieg is great. AOC is great. Gretchen Whitmer's great. I do not want to see a woman or a gay man on the ticket, because I think that in this country, there are still way too many people who cannot envision that, could not deal with that. I remember when Trump, I don't know if it was Trump was running, somebody was down south at a diner, as of course every reporter goes to a diner, talking to people. And I don't know if this was when he was running against Hillary, but I remember, you know, they talked to this older white guy and he was like, well, I just don't think a woman can be president. And, you know, fine, you know, that maybe wasn't too shocking. But then the reporter put the microphone in front of the guy's wife. And she was like, well, you know, I don't think a woman should be president. I just don't. Right. And when we've got that going for us, you know, I think that we need to retake power. We need to remind this country what it was all about, and then maybe down the road at some point, probably after I'm dead, we will get to a point where we can be more open-minded about the best person for the job, not necessarily the best man for the job. When, you know, you look at politics all across this country, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing, I just had this conversation with students today about the difference between like doing for a party, doing like the right thing and doing the winning thing. And the strategy to win an election for the Democratic Party has been to nominate the person that they think other people who might be racist or sexist or xenophobic or homophobic would vote for. And so rather than choosing your first choice candidate in a primary, you choose the person that you think other people would vote for in the general election because you don't want the person from the other party to win. And we end up in what's called the electability cycle. So this keeps us in this cycle of, for Democratic voters, I say we, meaning Democratic voters in this case, in the cycle of, you know, there's been 2 times in the last couple of elections where a woman, and in one case a woman of color, was running against a man and didn't win. And while gender and race were part of the story, it makes voters weary because the stakes feel so high that Democratic voters are like, listen, a Democrat needs to be in the White House. And so who are other people going to vote for? Like, I'd vote for Pete Buttigieg, or I would vote for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but other people won't. So then I won't either, because I want to make sure that the candidate that can win wins. And that candidate has been a white man, a married Christian, straight, white man. And they also founded the country. So that's not surprising that we tend to think those are the people who can best serve. And while that still exists across the electorate, of course, it is disproportionate in the Republican Party in terms of voting in the general. But because of that, it very much affects Democratic primary voters on who they think is best equipped to win.
Yeah. And I know it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, but I think we've seen, you know, we've conducted the experiment twice, and both times we've gotten the same result. And I'm tired. I would like to give it a couple of decades before we experiment again. And I know, you know, I was talking to a strategist who has in the past represented Gretchen Whitmer, and he was like, oh, but she's so good and she's so smart. And you know what? Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference.
Yeah. All of that can be true. We've had the most qualified candidates that have run in the last couple of cycles have been women. And for various reasons, as we all know and the listeners know across the last couple of cycles, that has not panned out. And again, it makes us weary. And I think to your point about, for Democratic voters, the fatigue of loss, like losing elections and losing elections to a particular person at this point, and a movement that you sort of push things to the side that might be important to you or that the party was pushing for at any given time to just win. And like, I get that. I get the motivation. It's a rational motivation, but it keeps us stuck in the cycle because you don't get out of it until you get out of it. And to get out of it, you have to try again. But the stakes feel high to try again. And I think those elections, losing against Donald Trump twice and the women who ran, are atypical female candidates in so many ways. And so I say this in all sincerity.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, we had, when Hillary Clinton won, she was a first lady, a senator, had her husband impeached, like, you know, was with her husband. He was impeached in office. You know, she carried baggage with her from her service in office in time as first lady, where people hated her. Even if they didn't know anything about other than her name, she carried all that baggage with her in ways we don't see male candidates carry baggage. So she was an atypical candidate in that way. Kamala Harris, because of her ascendancy to the nomination, was an atypical candidate. And I will add, of course, as a woman of color, and we talk about motherhood again, a stepmother is a mother, is a mother, is a mother. We all know this, but she wasn't treated as such. There were things about her as a person and her ascendancy to the nomination, an atypical candidate. And so it sounds weird or bad to say that we haven't had an election where a, quote, regular woman candidate has gotten the nomination. We don't know what that looks like in a general election. I would like to see what that looks like.
So who would you say is a regular, who fits that bill of being the regular woman candidate?
I know it sounds so in some ways condescending to say, and I don't mean it as such, right? You know, you named some of them. I think Gretchen Whitmer. I think Gretchen Whitmer is a really interesting example here because, yes, she carries a certain amount of vitriol and baggage because of her policies as governor during COVID and the way that she was attacked by the right. But she ticks the boxes of what we want a woman to be, to just be palatable, right? She's married, she has children, she presents feminine, she talks about issues both feminine and masculine. And
but
she
if
has
they're
executive
feminine,
experience.
then they won't be tough enough. That's a double-edged sword. You know, we want them to be feminine, but how are you going to go up against Putin if you're too nice? And I remember when Bill Clinton was running for president and Hillary was out there campaigning, and the backlash was so strong, she ended up making cookies. That was, you know, the big thing. She's just not soft. She's just not this. And so instead of talking policy, she made cookies, and they did stories about her making cookies.
Yes, absolutely. She did. And that was because she had to soften as first lady so that she could be the mother of the nation and temper the masculinity of him being the most powerful person in the world. And you're absolutely right. There is a trap. We call it the double bind of being too feminine or not feminine enough, too competent or not competent enough. It's a battle a woman cannot win. And I think Gretchen Whitmer has towed the line as best as a woman can, and also noting that she's a white woman. And this is where, you know, we saw with what happened with Kamala Harris is that I hate to say it, it makes me want to throw up in my mouth, but to have a woman president, someone who can get the nomination, it is likely going to be a white woman.
Or a white man.
Well, of course.
You know, I mean, everybody's like, oh, Wes Moore, he's so great. Yeah, you know what? I'm sorry. I want a straight white man at the top of the ticket and a straight white man in the vice president's role. And the reason I say even as VP is because I think that with a woman like Kamala was with Biden, people will think that, as Joe Biden did, that somehow the man at the top of the ticket will anoint his vice president. And we don't want that woman up there. We don't want her in the president's seat. And so we don't want her a heartbeat away from the president. We don't want that president we vote for to, you know, get behind her. No, no, no.
Yes. I think, again, strategically and pragmatically, if you're a Democratic voter and you want to win an election, you think about who wins. I think Westmore is interesting, very interesting, and has a really, really bright future. I think he will run for president. I think he will be successful. And the question for the party as an institution, as a gatekeeper, is whether it's a smart strategy now in 2028, or depending on who wins in 2028, what 32 looks like, and on from there. But people of color and minoritized people are told to wait. That is their whole life story, is just wait, just wait, just wait. And you get tired of being told, just wait. And that's a tension, right? Of the people that vote for Democrats have been told to wait for their turn for their whole lives. And so the message that could be sent by saying, well, also let's wait to get one of you in the White House again to make sure we win, is then how are we being represented? It's a very, very precarious situation that the Democratic Party is in right now.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But that will be a discussion that we will be having for years and years and years.
Absolutely, we will.
Yeah. Thanks, Suzanne. Political science professor Suzanne Chod from North Central College. Thank you, as always, for being here.
Thank you for having me, Joan. Feel better.
Thanks. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm very happy to welcome back to our airwaves former Chicago mayor, also currently senior, I love that, David, I can't let it go. Currently senior advisor for the group Reform for Illinois, David Orr is here. Thanks for joining me today. And if you want me to stop that, I will. I love that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Well, we've got another mayoral election coming up. I think right now I have a list. I have a document on my desktop with people who are running for mayor, and it is getting longer and longer and longer. I was texting you earlier. I think when Lori Lightfoot came up for re-election, at one point there were 14 people in the race. Do you think it will get that big this time around? What do we have now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That one quit. 7 as best I can count. We have 7 so far.
7. I expect a couple more, but I don't think we'll reach the 14 number. There's just so much wheeling and dealing, of course, going on. Given a lot of people are saying, at least that Alexei, our state's attorney, is in a strong position for all sorts of reasons, including raising a lot of money and having that experience now being state's attorney, not state's attorney, Secretary of State, having that position and all that comes with it. So there's that argument now. There's kind of dismiss that. But, there's going to be a boatload. For example, I think I was just thinking this, don't have any real facts on this, but I've certainly heard behind the table about people that are concerned. Maria Pappas, who's up there like my age.
Maria Pappas, Mike Quigley, Susanna Mendoza. And David, you've been a student of Chicago politics. It always amazes me when it comes time to throw your hat in the ring for mayor. It seems like we always get a couple of people nobody's ever heard of, that they have no experience in politics, and yet they're throwing their hat in for a race at what is actually a pretty high level. I mean, we have a cardiologist, Dr. Lisa Nee, who's declared that she's running to be mayor. Do these people really think they've got a shot, David? Or do they do it just to raise their profile? I mean, I know everybody said nobody thought Lori Lightfoot would have a shot, and she got in the race, and, she won, I think, because she got the Sun-Times endorsement. But so I don't know. Maybe I'm selling them short. Maybe they really do believe I could do this.
Yeah, she did have quite a bit of experience. I think it's fair, particularly in a place like Chicago, to question the motives, not to be particularly negative, just to question the motives of some people. There's others that you didn't mention that we really why they might be running. There's another, for example, a gentleman who's a Latino running. Why? He has no chance. It's kind of like Willie Wilson.
Really is he in again? I can't be sure. Is Willie Wilson back?
Yeah, Willie's back.
Okay.
I don't know if he's made all the official stuff, but he's certainly campaigning. And there's people like that have some talent and have some issues, but the likelihood is so unusual or impossible, you could almost say. It just does make you wonder. I don't know about the doctor here. There's all this stuff going on that, Willie could be running to take black votes away from the mayor.
He hasn't even, Brandon Johnson hasn't even thrown his name in the race yet, though I don't know why. Is there I was asking somebody else this, is there an advantage to waiting and being like the last person to declare that you're in the race? Because everybody's expecting him to. He talks like he's going to, but then he doesn't.
I can't think of any real advantage. Okay? In other words, if you're in right away, it's easier to raise money. I'm not saying that, Brandon couldn't be raising money right now, which he is. But I think a number of things it's easier. And it maybe gets harder and harder if people begin to be committed or leaning towards some other candidates.
Well, that would be my concern. Yeah. You wait too long and all the big endorsements have been sewn up. Some of the big, deep-pocketed Democratic donors might be already committed to somebody else. I mean, I knew there was, when Lisa Madigan ran for Attorney General, there was a very well-respected lawyer that got into the race very, very late. Only because, there were a lot of people who thought, it was just nepotism and, that we didn't want two Madigans in positions of power, whatever. And I remember finding out, because I was kind of close to some of the people working for him, that when he was reaching out for donations, people were saying, I'm really, really sorry, but I've already committed my money to Lisa. I've already committed my money to Lisa. I've already committed my money to Lisa. So it would seem that by waiting, he's depriving himself of endorsements and donations.
Right. I think that's a problem when you have, remember, the mayor has some talent, has done some decent things, but he's also just got low ratings, period, which is really hard and for someone to make up all that. So there's a key decision being made, and the kinds of things you're throwing out there are part of it. How long can he wait? Someone like Brandon has supporters, so he knows a certain amount of support would come there financially, and remember they remained a lot on their ground game and the fact that organizations and individuals can work hard on that, which means they wouldn't worry too much about getting the signatures. But yes, I think it's I don't know how much of a personal decision for Brandon, but if you just try to be as neutral about it as possible, and you notice that almost every poll out there that we know of is not very positive, okay? So it means that the key for Brandon, for Mayor Johnson, for example, is that in this race he'd have to get in the runoff, right? Because otherwise you're dead, which means he's got to be one of the two candidates. And if the polls have any significant meaning these days, it does look like a tough shot for him to be one of those two candidates. So, yes, I think there's a lot of, in other words, I do think there's risks to what he is doing. I happened to go to something recently where Brandon was speaking. I thought he did a pretty good job in terms of his message. But nothing was addressed about the challenge of, well, what about all the problems? And what about the shifts in key people? And just a little bit of extremism that didn't come up. That is, couldn't you get along with people better? And couldn't some of your staff get along with people? But again, I think it's important you get to see him. My purpose right now is to try and spend some time with as many candidates as I think are, worthy of that time, so I could make up my mind.
I remember
but I think
when
you're right. It's late.
when Lori was running and there was that huge field. I remember I was because I guess we just decided we were going to try to interview all of them. And I remember interviewing a guy.
Sure, right.
He was 26 years old. He had just started some kind of data or software company. Nobody knew him. He had very little support, very little money. And I remember during the interview thinking, this guy is doing this just to get his name out there so that he can build his business. And by the time we wrapped up the interview, I mean, if I'd have had more time, I would have said, like, dude, what are you doing? You don't have an ice cube's chance in hell of winning this. What? And he probably would have looked at me and said, well, you're talking to me, aren't you? And I would have to say, well, yep, as a matter of fact, I am. But sometimes I think people use a race like this to raise their profile, to promote other parts of their life.
Exactly. No, I think there's a lot to that. Like I say, even Willie, Willie's an interesting guy. Willie Wilson, referring to who really have no chance here. What's it all about? To being a kind of perennial candidate like that. Cardenas, for example, who's in a kind of a controversial position on that border review, which in many ways smells to high heaven anyway. And so, like I say, that's why people make all these comments. Oh, well, he's in just to hurt, what's her face, from Springfield. That kind of thing. But yes, I think people see it. In other words, there's not a great cost to jump in there. Okay, you do have to get the signatures, and that's a challenge. And there will be some people probably knocked off of the ballot because of those challenges to signatures, but maybe not. No, I don't think any of the major candidates will have that problem. So, anyway, yes, it's a free country, and people jump in there, and some do believe they know they're going, quote, to lose, but there's some importance to their career or getting their name out there, whatever it may be. That's a clear controversy all the time. I mean, almost never do we not have something like that.
Well, what about David Orr? He actually was mayor back in the day. So he knows the job. He knows what it entails. He knows all the players because, everybody's saying the job of mayor is really too big for one person. But when you get to a big job, I think the most important quality you can have is knowing who you need to surround yourself with. I may not be an expert on property taxes, but man, that David Orr is, so I'm going to get him involved in my administration. You don't have to know everything and everybody. You just have to kind of know who you can trust and who you can rely on. And frankly, I think David Orr knows the players pretty well.
But I would certainly agree, not that Orr knows the players, but I would certainly agree the most important thing, any mayor, like I said, because we don't have two or three, we have lots of staffers and stuff. The most important thing is picking top people. The opposite of that would be President Trump. Picks losers, picks haters in many cases, picks people that without this powerful, what you might say, almost machine control. There's so many comparisons one can make with the older machine and Trump. But the bottom line is, that's unless we just pick so many bad people that get you in trouble all the time. Whereas if you pick good people, personally myself, I just was so lucky because there weren't a lot of independents around. There weren't a lot of progressive Democrats when I was kind of involved in getting there. We had some very good progressive candidates, for example, in the city council over the years. Not too many of them were able to move up. And so even my position when I became county clerk, I was so lucky, and I'm not going to mention their names now, but I really found so many good people, people that knew better than I did about so many things. It was just really critical.
That was the criticism of Lori Lightfoot, and to some degree Brandon Johnson. They were elected in part because they were outsiders, but being outsiders, they didn't necessarily know who to put into positions of power. So who did they do? Who did they lean on? The people they trusted, the people who had been part of their campaign, the people who had worked for them. And Lori particularly got a bad rap for that instead of finding expertise, You know, she went with her campaign staff, and since she really hadn't been a super high-profile candidate, she didn't necessarily have the A team or even the B team working for her. So how do you? That's the only problem I see with being an outsider, and it's. I thought maybe because of his position with the Cook County Board and the Chicago Teachers Union, that Brandon would have a little bit more insight as to who the insiders are, but his administration is still getting criticized for the same thing, not having enough experienced people. And when he does bring on experienced people, they don't seem to last very long.
Well, it's also a related element in there. There are certainly some experienced people. There's some powerful groups that Brandon will rely on, if he runs again. But sometimes those powerful groups have a certain, what do you want to call, personality, okay? And for example, some battles of the teachers union, even some battles of the first administration, was kind of the notion, you're either with us or you're a jerk. You're either with us or you're a fascist. You're either with us or you're out to lunch. That's why I could make those comparisons with Trump back and forth all day. And I'm not saying everybody's like that. I think there's some good people he's got around that don't think that way, but there's enough of it. And I've watched, without mentioning these names right now, people in the city council who certainly have a lot of progressive views on a lot of things, but just were kind of what I'd call relatively mistreated rather than reached out to. That doesn't help. That doesn't help at all, particularly when you face so many difficult opposition. Harold Washington, he there he got a balance. He had to balance his support, which is significant enough to get him elected, at the same time to prove it was reaching out. So, for example, by 1980, what was it, 1985, if I'm getting that right, there's a special election in there with the 85 or 86 because the Chicago machine basically had prepared racist maps in the city council. Okay, because remember that Harold won, it was 29-21 against him. But the old machine would draw, as they often did, racist maps, discouraging particularly the advantage for African American and Latino voters. The bottom line was, when that was all done, there was a big change in the council. It was no longer 29-21, it was 25-25, which allowed the mayor to actually, the mayor could vote himself in tie votes to move things along. And I'm saying, so yes, you've got to preaching to the faithful, but at the same time, you do need to reach out to some of these people. And Harold was doing that. So back when they had that special election, his side won most of those races. And that's where he brought in Louis Gutierrez and Chuy Garcia and some others at that time. I think there was an openness there. He had tremendous opposition, but he was able to balance that better, is what I'm saying. But I also think in this notion of people picking good people, Harold Washington picked a lot of good people for, being department heads and so forth, which really helped.
David, we need to take a break. I'm speaking to Senior Advisor for Reform for Illinois, David Orr. We will be right back after this.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
If you are interested in buying a new home or refinancing the one you've got, you should call Team Hochberg, our trusted local lender. Team Hochberg has nearly 800 five-star Google reviews. Here's part of one from Mary. David is fantastic. He's always ready to help, whether buying, selling, refinancing, or helping with finances. He's patient even with complicated issues and goes the extra mile when others wouldn't. I can't recommend him enough. You won't regret calling David for any of your mortgage issues. I'm recommending him to my daughter and anyone needing a mortgage. So, Mary called asking for help consolidating her debt and was so thankful for David's guidance, she posted a 5-star review. If you want that same outstanding service that Mary got, call Team Hochberg now, 855-563-2843, or go online, 56david.com. Team Hochberg has helped me and thousands of WCPT listeners, but they can't help if you don't make that call. 855-563-2843, or go online, 56david.com. ACM Equal Housing Lender, NMLS 643114.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm here with Senior Advisor to Reform for Illinois, David Orr. David, I know that you keep an eye on what is going on in the Chicago City Council. Particularly, I know you've been looking into the sort of brouhaha around this landlord-tenant legislation. Tell us about that, if you would.
Yes. By the way, it is the 40th anniversary of the Landlord-Tenants Bill of Rights that I was fortunate to be very involved in, and thought it had a lot of advantages of helping a lot of places. So while that is going on, we have a situation now. Well, the mayor has introduced one piece of legislation, Mayor Johnson, and that's called the PRO legislation. And it's a thing about what could be done relating to renters, what they need, et cetera. The reality of he does want to convince many quote more progressive individuals to support him. There's a lot of renters who are voters. There's a lot of issues there. Okay. The real estate industry has basically helped present a different information group. It's called the FAIR Ordinance. The FAIR Ordinance is one that deals with a lot of tenant stuff. I guess the best way to say it, though, is if you look at the premier housing and tenant groups, okay, they, in this case, clearly side with the mayor's bill. It's called the PRO. You've got your group called Metropolitan Tenants Organization. MTO's been around. You've got the Law Center for Better Housing, which is something I've been associated with for a long time. And many of these groups have been looking at all this legislation. And one of the things that, I don't know how much more to go into this, but that the FAIR group, what people are afraid of, since it was prepared simply by the landlords, that it cuts a number of key provisions that have been helpful, and it does not support others that are really helpful, kind of like the right to counsel. Let me just mention that's something that's been going on. There's always going to be battles. We've got bad tenants, we've got bad landlords, we've got good tenants, we've got good landlords. But one of the issues that always comes up kind of over and over again is if, in fact, someone's going to be knocked out of a lease, if they're going to be kicked out, or all sorts of other reasons, there's a movement around the country and here to have what's called the right to counsel. And that basically means that if, in fact, you're getting a notice that you got to get out, maybe it's legal, maybe it's not, that there is a possibility of talking to an attorney. Again, Mayor Johnson.
Wouldn't you always have that possibility?
Oh, well, not everyone can afford it. Remember, a lot of our tenants don't have much money. This is to have one where it's provided. Okay? Now, we're not talking about, years and years of service, but an actual introduction conversation with a counselor. Again, the mayor has introduced something earlier, not this piece of legislation, but he's been doing this for the last at least a couple of years, and the city is picking up the tab for that. It's something that a lot of people think is really good. So that is still in his, I don't want to say it's his, but the various aldermen that pushed that, but the mayor had a lot to do with it. In the PRO legislation, they also have, for example, a Tenants Bill of Rights, just kind of clarity of what people legally have. And part of this whole thing about right to counsel is have to give reasons when someone's going to dump you as a tenant and get rid of you. Sometimes it's pretty simple, but it's not always the case. Anyway, so the number of things there, one of the better things would be to actually create a registry so there really would be a trustable information that could be valuable for everyone. A registry of landlords, who they are, how they can be reached. Way back in my days in fighting the city council against some of the bad buildings, had a lot of good ones, had a lot of bad buildings too, in Rogers Park and Edgewater. And it was always a struggle like that because you can get to court, you just get all your friends down there to go down there demanding some improvement in the property, et cetera. And the landlord's not there because they can't even find him. So there are good things in there, and that's why these groups like the Law Center, MTO, and others are supporting that. And again, there's good landlords out there, and many of them will be supporting the other bill. And that gets into a whole longer conversation. But that's what's going on right now. Like I say, and if it's done right, that could be a benefit to Mayor Washington, excuse me, to Mayor Johnson.
Brandon Johnson? Yeah.
That mayor, yes, right.
That one.
I'm a little slow in my old age here, you see.
No, you're not. Not at all. I used to worry that I was having memory issues, and then my son was 18 at the time, and we went out to lunch, and he couldn't remember anything. And I thought, well, clearly it's not just me. It must just be genetic. He's 18 and can't remember anything. I don't feel so bad. So, yeah.
All right, good.
Well, when do you think Brandon is going to share his future plans with us? I mean, how much longer can he wait, realistically?
Well, he can wait a while. In other words, the petitions, I can't tell you, remember right now exactly the date, but petitions actually could be worked on earlier, but he knows he's got enough people. Now, that's one thing that they were good at, the field work. People that go door to door, they know they have enough of that they can really gather their signatures very quickly. So it's a little less difficult for him than some of the candidates who really have to figure out how they're going to get all those signatures.
David, I'm sorry. I got so chatty. We ran out of time, and I apologize. I just decided I'd check the time, and I was like, "Oh my God, we were supposed to shut up talking a while ago." But thank you so much.
Well,
and we were worried we wouldn't have enough to talk about. I mean, come on.
Right. All right.
We will do this again soon, my good friend. Take care of yourself. And Patty Vasquez's show is next, but Patty is taking some much-needed time out. Elliot Serrano and Ken Mejia Beal are her guest hosts. I will see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and I hope you have a great evening, my friends. Good night.